Ooh, okay, it's been a couple days. Let's get back at it. I've just come off of a Zoom call with an antinatalist YouTuber who bit off more than he bargained for. He came on to strawman me and to accuse me of all of this stuff, and I just wrecked him so hard that he's probably not going to post it, and wasted everyone's time. Because again, you can't debate against extinction. There is no debate. What made you become pro-extinction? Great question, Philip. Thank you for asking. So I guess, well, firstly, the movement invited me. So, that kind of made me join the movement. But what made me, agree and accept to join the movement was, I guess, understanding how bad suffering is, how terrible it is, and that it should be the priority to deal with it. I came into the movement with an understanding already that forced existence is a bad thing. The suffering that you experience while you're trapped in that prison is terrible. It's the worst thing that can happen, really, being imprisoned in a life that you never asked for, a body that you never asked for, and suffering that you never asked for. I'm glad this is finally being taken seriously. It's about time. It was only a matter of time before there was finally a movement that targeted all suffering instead of just some. You've had the anti-slavery movement, women's rights. There's loads and loads of movements, but all of them are only for changing society in a small way. None of them are actually for ending all suffering. Are you suggesting people take their lives? No. It's quite the opposite, actually. We are against any individual acts of violence or harm, and actually we want humanity to continue healthy and strong and with a large population, because the thing is, humanity is the vehicle for helping others and ending suffering for other life. So if humanity went extinct first, then animals would suffer needlessly for billions of more years, and animals suffer worse than us. So, that would be absolutely the wrong thing to do. You don't believe me? Okay, well, so effectively you're believing in something that you've made up. Fair enough. But yeah, obviously, animal extinction is going to require human intervention, engineering, science, and our action. If we went extinct, then animals would suffer way worse in way larger numbers and for forever. So what's the plan exactly? That's a great question. So we're kind of in phase one of the movement at the minute. We're gathering people to the movement to help us work on how to end all suffering. Now, the way is really euthanasia, especially for animals. That prevents them from suffering, and it also, more importantly, or equally as importantly, prevents them from reproducing and forcing more lives to suffer. So only total extinction prevents more generations being forced into suffering. So that's why you need total extinction. It's the only way to end suffering, to stop forced existence, to stop innocents from being trapped into bodies and lives that they never asked for. It's effectively we live in hell, and the pro-extinction movement is saying, let's make it so that no one else has to get sent to hell. I mean, that is basically the unfortunate reality that we're dealing with. All right, nobody has requested to join yet, but I'm happy to take some debates. If anyone has questions, if anyone just wants to have a discussion, or if anyone wants to join the movement as an activist and to help us work towards ending all suffering, You can join our website. We have a Discord there, and you can join the Discord. Sorry, on our website. The link is there at the bottom of the page. I think we have someone requesting to join. Hello.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. If this is how you feel, why don't you just, influence people right now before us start the movement?
Yeah, so it's a real movement. We're against self-harm. That's
I mean,
counterproductive.
you could really be influential if you just
That would be
did it now.
counterproductive to the movement. That would probably get us marked as crazy people, as terrorists, but we aren't any of those things. Ending suffering is a responsible and challenging thing to do. It's going to require serious people, intelligent people, and compassionate people, ethical people. Taking our own lives would not help prevent suffering for others in any meaningful way. It would just draw crazy people to the movement, and we don't want that. Hello.
Hello.
How's it going?
Good. I can't tell if you're being serious, but if you wanted to brainstorm, wouldn't it make sense to just nuke the planet? That would be the most productive
No,
way.
so the thing is that would actually be very counterproductive. The asteroids that nearly wiped out the dinosaurs last time, which didn't wipe out the dinosaurs, it had the power of over 1 billion nukes. And, obviously the damage it did was, unbelievable. So nukes aren't actually a realistic way to end any suffering. They certainly don't guarantee any sense of total extinction. We instead need much bigger and more serious endeavors than that. You're thinking of just a rushed, shallow method, but it's not a serious thing. So we need to remove our dependence on animals on Earth. We need to remove the animal populations on Earth. And we need to be working towards universal extinction and ending suffering universally. The universe will probably be full of life, suffering just like Earth is as well. So that's part of our mission. It's developing universe-wide extinction potentially. Because the thing is, we're against all suffering and all potential of suffering. And there's no reason to say that we can't help the universe. Humanity's only just started its adventure into science and technology. The things we'll be able to do in the future will be, insane compared to what we can do now.
Right. So what's the timeline? What's the timeline on this?
There is no timeline, really. It's we're just doing everything we can. So the biggest obstacle is human resistance. So that is our biggest problem to solve. That could take hundreds of years, for example. We don't know, but we are working on it. And we encourage everyone who does care about ending suffering to join the movement and help us work to make it possible.
It doesn't seem like you have a strategy. Shouldn't you just be like an antinatalist?
Antinatalism is a self-defeating ideology, actually. It does nothing to put any sort of brakes on humanity as a species. It also completely disregards and discriminates against animals, so that's wrong. And yeah, the idea that not having a kid is going to contribute to human extinction is naive. If you don't have a kid, someone else will. And you've got religious zealots, you've got, people of all sort of backgrounds that are more likely to just keep having kids. If you've ever seen the film Idiocracy, then that's basically what antinatalists are advocating for. That the only people thinking about these questions go extinct and leave the world to horny sadists.
Fascinating. Well, I don't know how to leave, but it's an interesting idea for sure.
I'll do that for you. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for your questions. It's more than just an idea. We're a real movement. It's not a fantasy. Ending all suffering is our duty. It's our moral obligation. It's the biggest priority, the biggest moral urgency that we could possibly have. So yeah, obviously, it's a real movement. We're working towards, solving the biggest problem in the world, which is suffering, forced existence, and life being forced into these terrible conditions. No one should have to suffer, and extinction is the only way to end all suffering. If we could click our fingers now and have, a suffering-free world with no life, just delete the universe basically, then yeah, that would be the right thing to do. Sure, it would end all the joy and the shallow pleasures of the, selfish people in the world, but it would end all of the cruel suffering that the unlucky ones are having to deal with and being forced to experience. So that's more important. Should we prioritize a selfish, lucky minority, or the unlucky majority that's being tortured? It should be an easy answer for anyone, right? If you struggle with that, then you are the oppressor. You are the minority saying the suffering should continue. Ha ha ha. But no, it shouldn't continue. It's wrong and it's terrible. Yes, Olos, let's get you on. I think I know what you're going to say though. But hello.
What do you think I'm going to say?
Well, you've just said something about walking in front of a bus. So, is it related to that?
You're imposing your internal suffrage onto the rest of the world. So why don't you do us the favor and remove yourself? Take your own suffrage out of the equation.
Yeah, because you see, that would only do a favor to selfish, immoral people like you. That wouldn't do a favor.
You're selfish and immoral, thinking that you know what's best for everybody's life.
That wouldn't do a favor to the victims, right? It wouldn't do a favor to the sufferers. That would only do a favor to the oppressor, selfish bigots like yourself, who are afraid of people coming to end suffering and fight for the victims. So yeah, that's not a good thing. It's not a good idea. Activists, telling an activist to stop existing is obviously going to be a bad thing for the movement that activist is fighting for. If no one's fighting for the movement, then there is no movement, and the oppressors like you have won. So we're not going to do that. We're not going to allow that. And if you actually think that makes sense as a serious and good suggestion for me in the movement, then I would say that there is something very wrong with you, and your ability to comprehend things is compromised. So the queue is currently empty. We've got 30 people watching. If anyone wants to hop on and have a discussion, a debate, a conversation, ask some questions, then now would be a great time to do it. Okay. Hi, how's it going?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
You are absolutely insane.
Okay. Why is that?
Yeah. I think you're batshit insane.
Do you want to explain why? Do you want to go into some detail here, or are you not able to?
What do you mean explain why? You literally want to wipe out all life
so
on
you're not
Earth.
able to elaborate or use words. I think you're the insane one. If you're going to make some bold claims like that, you should be able to go into detail, back it up, right? Otherwise, you're just talking nonsense. Okay, next caller, please. Welcome to the Extinction Zone. How can I help you today?
Hey, man, you look such a strange pro-war kind of presentation here. Usually people who are pro-war usually have flags and all that going on, right?
So we're not really, we don't really prefer or like the idea of war. No.
But that's what's going to cause human extinction, right?
No, I would say that a war would definitely not cause human extinction. Most wars are not going to cover the entire planet. You've got bunkers. People would definitely find a way to survive. And
But I mean, it's the quickest way, right?
but the
You
thing
want an
is,
extinction,
the
we
thing is,
should
what you're
just do it
talking
that,
about
right?
is nonsense, because it wouldn't help animals, right? And it's not the quickest way at all.
Wait, you want to help animals? I thought you wanted to extinct them.
That is helping them. Extinction is the best way to protect animals from suffering.
And the quickest way to do that would be nuclear weapons, right?
No,
Just
because
create
as
a
I
nuclear
explained to someone
winter.
earlier, the last asteroid that hit the planet had the power of over 1 billion nukes, right? Which we have nowhere near to that. And it still didn't wipe out all life. And it also didn't prevent life from coming back or redeveloping. So the whole nuke idea is it's a childish idea. It
Well, how do you
doesn't.
plan to do it?
It's a childish idea. It doesn't acknowledge, real science. It doesn't actually think the problem through at
So
all.
what's your solution? How do you do it?
Well, so for animals, euthanasia would be the way forward.
So instead of nuking them all in one go, you would want to do it one by one with like
Well, like I
injections?
said, nukes aren't an effective way to cause extinction. They're just not. So, yeah,
And euthanasia is?
if it's done in a sort of systemic and organized way, then yeah.
Like you might have a kind of railroad camp where you bring all the animals and euthanize them.
I don't know exactly how it would go down, but we probably wouldn't try to imitate history for the sake of it. Hello,
Hey, what's up?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. So let's see. So I guess is your argument pretty much something like so does this go for like all life?
Yeah.
All right, so I guess if we take it to like the human domain, is it something like, maybe, pregnancy is harmful, we should eliminate harm, or like pregnancy causes women to suffer, we should eliminate suffering, so we should like, take out the whole world.
Causes women to suffer. Are you
Yeah.
serious?
Yeah.
What about the child?
Yeah, is that part of your argument as well? Like it causes the child to suffer as well, and then to eliminate suffering, right? If it was the case that people like we should try to promote people to voluntarily want to be taken out. Is that kind of the idea
No.
here?
No, not at all.
Okay, then what's the idea? Just want to know.
So we need a systematic, organized, way to have total animal extinction on Earth. That's going to involve euthanasia, and it's also going to involve scientifically, technologically removing our dependence on animals. So, switching to, remove farmed animals and meat, things like that. Removing the need for ocean life to generate oxygen and things like that as well. So we're against human extinction until the very end. Animals take priority. They suffer worse than us and in greater numbers than us. So it will probably take hundreds, even thousands of years to end all suffering. And we need active solutions for that, not passive solutions like antinatalism. Again, antinatalism discriminates against animals. It just completely disregards their suffering. And if humanity went extinct, then animals would suffer, again, for billions of years. So that's wrong. So as the only ones capable of causing extinction, humanity has to stay strong, stay around for a long time to come.
Okay, so I guess when it comes to, these animals, right? When it comes to like the forced euthanasia, I guess like how do you reconcile that with the fact that they don't have, volition in that exchange?
Well, they didn't have any volition when they were forced into the world, right? So it's actually
Yeah, but just because they didn't have
releasing
volition
them.
when they were forced into the world, it
Yeah,
doesn't
so
follow that now we should
it
take
totally
them out.
does. It totally does. So it's releasing them from that prison. It's protecting them from suffering, and it's also preventing them from producing further generations that will continue to suffer.
Yeah, so I reject that entailment, that because when they came in it wasn't voluntary. It follows that now we should take them out
Well,
involuntarily.
look, it doesn't matter if it was voluntary, right? It wasn't, but it wouldn't matter if it were. Okay, animals can't consent. Animals aren't intelligent. They don't know what's best for them or in their best interest. They are slaves to their survival instinct, hunger, reproduction, horniness, things like that.
And for that reason, it follows that we should euthanize them.
It's the best way to end animal suffering, basically, and it's the only way to end animal suffering.
So I guess, like, let's say that we had a human, in such a state to where, they didn't have the ability to exemplify like higher rationale and reasoning. Would it be best to euthanize them now, since they'd be on the level of an animal?
I mean, I'd leave that sort of up to a doctor, probably, and the family. But yeah, we can look at answering those questions for sure. So again, we're firmly against individual acts of violence or euthanasia. It has to be done in a systematic, sort of governmental way, right? But yeah, we can definitely look into supporting euthanasia for humans for when they are suffering. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, like if they were on like the same level of like an animal, right? Because you're talking about, because it's the case that animals, they have lower level intelligence. So if it was the case that humans with lower level intelligence, can we euthanize them first? Would that be an entailment of like your view?
Potentially.
Okay, and then also like when it comes to the suffering, I guess, how do you know that the intrinsic goods, in life don't outweigh that suffering? Like how are you doing your calculus?
So yeah, I mean, the calculus is
And by
very
intrinsic
simple.
goods, or my bad, I didn't mean to cut you off. Like by intrinsic goods, I just mean things like love, family, relationship, those type of things. But go ahead.
Yeah, because those things are completely worthless compared to safety from suffering, right? Safety comes first. It's more important than those things, and it's
How come?
also about fairness as well, right? What you're suggesting is that some should be tortured so that others can have fun. That's not fair. It's not right, and they don't need that. Whereas everyone does need safety from suffering. It's far more important.
No, but I guess like what's the argument for that? That's what we should prioritize the most.
Yeah, but I mean, it's simple, right? Why should we prioritize selfish people having fun over innocents being tortured? It's obviously not the right thing to do. Those that are suffering should be prioritized. They need help the most, right?
Yeah, but the problem here is like when you're saying that people that are suffering need help, right? There's a difference between that and then saying that they need to be euthanized. Right. So how do you go from that to then reach the conclusion that they should be euthanized? That's what I want to know. How does that follow?
Because it's about protecting them from suffering, and it's also about protecting potential victims of reproduction from being forced into the world. So you can't guarantee that no more innocents are going to be forced to exist into a life that they never asked for, didn't want, and then be tortured, unless you have total extinction.
Yeah, but but that goes back to the further question, which was, how do you know that the intrinsic goods don't outweigh the suffering? Because when I asked you that, you kind of just said, well, it's
Well,
suffering. Like you kind of just
it's
restated your
a
conclusion.
bit of a loaded, sort of invalid question to begin with. That's why it's a sort of
So are you saying like even if there was X amount of suffering, like let's say that there was 99.9% like well-being or goodness, but then there was like 0.01% suffering, would that justify taking out everyone since there's that 0.1% suffering?
Yeah, it would. So
So even if there was one little sliver of
so the thing
suffering
is,
and everything else was well-being and good, that would justify
well,
it.
I mean, firstly, it's not a realistic scenario, and
It's
secondly,
a hypothetical to test your principle,
well,
to
let's
test your
answer
line of
a real
reasoning.
question, and a more serious question, right?
This
So
is a serious question.
yeah, but basically, life deserves 100% safety from suffering. Anything less than that is wrong, right?
Okay,
Because
so are you saying so are you saying even if there was a little suffering, like let's say we had a world where everything was going to be good, but one person would stub their toe. Since there's going to be that little bit of suffering, does it follow that we should therefore, eliminate everyone? Obviously through the euthanasia processes that you were talking about.
no, but that's not the world we live in. It's not a
Okay,
realistic.
okay, so
No,
so if
Jaden, you're talking about an unrealistic scenario that will never happen. So
No, what
it's
I'm giving you is
essentially
hypotheticals to test your
useless.
logic, to see your
It's useless to
calculus.
talk about.
No, I want to see your calculus. So if it's the case that, one little bit of suffering wouldn't justify this, then how much suffering justifies this? That's what I want to know.
Well, basically, in your scenario,
No,
there
not my
is,
scenario. I want you to give a positive case.
Jaden, in your scenario, and
No, not my scenario. I want you to give a positive case.
Okay. So the again, like I said, anything less than 100% safety from a bad life, from things going wrong, would be unacceptable. So it would have to be, godlike powers of, providing, certain safety. So anything less than that is unacceptable. It's not good enough, and it can create suffering, and it certainly risks suffering. So, if we had heaven, Jaden, then that would probably be fine. But we don't, and that's not a realistic thing. You're essentially fantasizing out of reality, so let's stay grounded in reality. Okay? We're not realistically going to achieve 100% safety from suffering for life without extinction. You'd have to cure every last disease, prevent every last natural disaster, injury. It's not a realistic thing. If I had a kid right now, it's impossible to give them a guarantee that they're not going to have a bad life. You can't guarantee that, okay? You just simply cannot. But if I don't have that child, it does guarantee that they're safe from suffering. And that is far more important than any shallow, fleeting pleasures that you might get in life. Safety is far more important, okay? So that's what it's about, and nobody should have to suffer. All of these people are advocating for an incredibly cruel and exploitative system where some selfish minority has fun at the expense of the majority being tortured horrifically. Wild animals and animals in general are the largest population on this planet, and they suffer far, far worse than humans do, okay? Way worse. You would not want to be an animal. Nobody should, but currently we only have them existing so that we can exploit them, so that we can point at them and say, wow, aren't they beautiful? Aren't they interesting? But we're not asking, are they okay? Are they happy? Are they suffering? Because no one gives a shit. All they say is, wow, it's amazing. What an interesting creature. Oh, look at the way their wings work. And aren't they amazing? Aren't they beautiful? But no one gives a damn about, are they okay? So, it's wrong. It's just exploitation. It's let's have animals suffering so that we can have fun. And, the animals aren't having any sort of great life anyway, right? The animals aren't, unrolling the picnic blanket with their family and, lying down and, playing games in the park. No, they're being eaten alive. They're starving to death. They've got many parasites, diseases. They're being hunted by murderous and terrifying animals all day, every day. They have no conditions. They can't brush their teeth. They don't have a fridge full of food. They're basically in hell. Can you imagine being born as a mouse in the wild? It's going to be the most terrifying and horrific experience possible, and just pure misery and suffering. Hello.
How's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I disagree with you in how much you value suffering. Like, I acknowledge that like most people suffer and like most animals suffer, but I don't think that necessarily means that we should, try in any way to eradicate suffering, because I think the only thing that gives life meaning and gives, not life, the universe, the only thing that gives the universe meaning is the fact that there's an intelligent being to actually experience
So why
it.
does the universe need meaning, and why does that justify babies being raped to death?
The universe doesn't need meaning, but I want it to have meaning because I'm a human with like agency and free thought, and
Okay.
I
But
value
if you're advocating for children to be tortured and murdered, then you need a good reason for it.
Well, like obviously, yeah, that's a horrible thing to happen, but I don't think the solution to it is just like to eradicate the experience of life altogether.
So you think that some vague experiences in life are more important than children being safe from being, raped and tortured?
Yeah, yeah, I do, because I think like philosophically, it's just a case of like
Don't
if
you think
nothing
that's kind of
existed,
gross?
there would be no reason to live.
I think that's kind of gross, though. You're saying that babies, children should be tortured so that
Well, like
privileged people like you can have fun at their expense.
no, that's all I'm saying, because wouldn't murdering everyone be like equally as bad as that?
No, no,
Or worse, because that's what like you advocate for. So
no.
like I think that the things that you speak of, obviously we should like try our hardest to eradicate that completely. We should probably give the death penalty to the people who do those kind of things, etc. But like,
So let
like
me
you're
get this straight.
advocating
Your argument is that extinction will cause more suffering than it prevents. Is that right?
like in one time period, yeah, it would.
But don't you think that millions of more years of suffering greatly outweighs any harm that extinction could possibly cause?
I don't hold suffering as my highest like moral value of like stopping it.
Right,
So
but let's talk
like
rationally and logically here, because that's what you just said. Okay, you just said that wouldn't extinction cause more suffering than it prevents? So the answer is obviously no. It couldn't possibly cause more suffering than it prevents.
why do you hold suffering as your highest moral value?
Out of empathy, compassion, logic, you're not going to have a good world where people like you are saying that children should be
Where does your logic stem
fun.
from? Where does the logic stem from? Like, what's the root of that logic? Like, why is suffering bad? Why does
Why
like
is suffering
why
bad?
does
I mean, you
why
don't.
does
The thing is,
why does the
you don't.
badness of suffering outweigh the
You don't
like
need logic.
goodness of the
You don't
experience of
need
life?
logic to understand that suffering is bad, right? I mean, a child being tortured to death, isn't it obvious that that's bad?
Yeah,
Like,
it is.
if you need further justification for why a child being tortured is bad, then that's an unreasonable request, essentially.
Oh, yeah, that's fair enough. No, I see your point. I think that's fair, but I'm just not going to agree with it, because I think that I think that even the slightest bit of an experience of goodness in life
Well,
outweighs
I'd
an
say that
experience
you
of
should
bad.
be against the lucky oppressors and you should be defending the innocents who are being tortured, right? You're essentially licking the boots of, basically billionaires and
Well, I'm
saying
licking my
yes,
boots
and
because I
saying
enjoy
yes,
life, though.
these billionaires are more important than the victims that they're exploiting and trampling on. That's what you're advocating.
No,
And
I'm not, because
so you've
billionaires
got
aren't
it
the
the
only
wrong way
people who
round.
experience goodness in
Got it the
life.
wrong way round. Instead of advocating for the privileged ones, you should be advocating for those who are unprivileged, okay? So you've got it the wrong way round. We should help those that need help instead of those that are being selfish and prioritizing their shallow pleasures over children being tortured, like what you're doing.
Well, it's not just billionaires to experience goodness in life. Like if I look around at the people who I'm friends with, like none of them are billionaires, but they all enjoy life. I enjoy life. I'm definitely not a billionaire, so it's definitely not just like a billionaire thing of it's like us versus them, and I'm licking the
So
boots.
you like a system. You're in favor of a system that says children being tortured to death is okay. It's acceptable. We should just be cool with it.
No, the system doesn't say that. The system says the solution to it isn't murdering like every single living
But we're
thing.
not advocating for murder. We're advocating for euthanasia and for protection from for future generations from being forced into lives that they didn't want and didn't ask for, bodies that they didn't want and didn't ask for, and unsafe conditions.
Okay, well, the system doesn't like my moral system. Like we can talk about the system of the world and like what that values, but like my moral system says that like those bad things should be stopped. But the solution to that isn't what you're proposing. It isn't
Well, it's not
massive.
about the solution, right? You're saying, yes, they should be stopped. Well, I'm glad you can agree with that. So why do you care about what the solution is? The thing is, if you're being honest and sincere when you're saying, yes, those things should be stopped, then, you shouldn't say, oh, the solution is, I don't like that solution and therefore it shouldn't be stopped, right? That doesn't make sense. So, no child should be tortured. The pro-extinction movement is about saying, yeah, no child should be tortured for some selfish, privileged piece of work who is saying, what about my joy? I think my joy justifies children being tortured. So that's wrong. It's immoral. It's cruel. And, as long as you keep supporting that, you're never going to have a good world because you're having a selfish and exploitative system of cruelty, embedded into it and saying that that's acceptable and we should just be fine with it.
Okay, well, again, like I value life existing. Like that's just like that's.
But you value life existing over, the suffering of those that have to exist, right? You're blindly valuing life, even if it gets tortured. So that doesn't make sense. That's illogical. You might as well be valuing nature instead of those that live inside of nature. It ignores the victims, it downplays them, trivializes them, and it's wrong.
You're saying I should value nature, but like, are you
I'm
proposing
saying you
that-
should value life and those that actually have to suffer instead of just the concept of life, right? You're saying I value the concept of life, but you don't value it, care about it. Care about those who have to live instead of just the concept and idea of it because you think it's cool.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I see your perspective, but I'm just not going to agree out of selfishness.
Well, thank you for being honest. Thank you for coming on. Appreciate your time. And that's, a shame. Let's get Brandon on. Doc Brandon, hello.
Hello, James. How you doing, mate?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. I have a question. Would you voluntarily, if you were given the choice, suffer a finite amount in order to guarantee an infinite bliss for a number of other conscious beings?
What do you mean by infinite bliss?
I mean the kind of completely the kind of bliss that has no trade-offs and is not at the expense of anyone other than you.
Do you mean like
voluntarily taking
heaven,
the suffer.
basically, like a heaven-like experience?
Yeah, sure. Whatever, like you think satisfies the condition of there being no suffering, basically.
No, basically. So we don't really agree with, others suffering so that others can have pleasure, right? We only really agree with suffering in the pursuit of ending suffering, right?
Okay, but there would be no suffering in the situation that.
Right, but you're suggesting that I would have to suffer, right?
Well, yeah. I'm not suggesting you would have to. I'm asking if you would voluntarily.
How bad's the suffering going to be?
So I'll deliberately make it vague. Let's say that you don't know, but you know that it's finite. It could be really horrific, but it will end. It could be not that bad, but you don't know beforehand.
Yeah, I'm going to go with no.
Okay. Talk me through that logic. Why not?
We just don't really value pleasure, right? So I just wouldn't see the point, especially if you're suggesting that it would be like a new life form that's being forced to exist for this scenario, one that doesn't exist already. Now, I think most extinctionists would suffer if it was going to protect others from suffering. So, if we had to suffer for 100 years of torture to protect, someone else from that, then we might do it.
Okay. So if you had to suffer if I change the hypothetical just a little and say same situation, but rather than securing a heaven, you are just guaranteeing for, you can choose the amount of organisms that they will never suffer. And they'll still exist. That's not extinction. They would exist, but never suffer.
Yeah, so it's a great question, actually, because the thing about selflessness and empathy is that it really just kind of prioritizes, almost the mathematics of it, what's going to have more suffering, what's going to have less suffering, what's better, what's worse. And sometimes it is difficult to to do that maths, if it's 1-to-1, it's a lot easier. But if it's 1-to-3 or something, it starts to get a bit complicated. But so no, I wouldn't necessarily prioritize my own suffering or someone else's. If I had to suffer a year to protect someone else from suffering a month, then I probably wouldn't do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. So part of the reason I was asking the question is to kind of probe as to whether there is like a utilitarian-esque value judgment going on. And it sounds like to some degree there is, and that's not a got you like that. Like, I get it. You've got to balance all of the multiple things that are of value in a paradigm.
Yeah.
And so is it fair to say that you are trying to minimize the quantity of suffering with the best trade-off possible?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, the priority is suffering because the priority is safety. It's kind of fairness and equality, if you will, and you can't have any fairness or equality when you're allowing suffering, right? That's an inherently unfair system. So, to have a fair system, you have to prioritize the suffering.
The minimization of the suffering, yeah. And so I've said this before. It seems like that is compatible with the idea of seeking to achieve a sufferingless existence rather than extinction, aiming for a sufferingless existence.
But the problem,
and unless that's in principle impossible, why would I not aim for that?
The main problem with that is that we live in a world of nature, right? So it's that nature which is the threat, and it's the existence of nature which complicates the fantasy of just having a suffering-free world. So as long as there's nature torturing innocent animals, we can't just ignore it and focus on pleasure. So,
I agree. I hear you. Like we would part of what would need solving is like bull sharks need to become vegetarians. Like, and that's a crazy idea, but like not impossible. If we can get to genetic engineering and like literally domesticate and program,
you'd have to cure every single disease. You'd have to, prevent every single injury, every single natural disaster. You'd have to prevent, the risk of an asteroid. You'd have to prevent, all crime. You'd have to prevent, every single last, weather condition like freezing to death, burning to death in forest fires.
Absolutely. You would, and I totally agree. But I think if we look at a trajectory for achieving that over even just the last 200 years, it's an exponential increase in our resistance to those things. And if we just keep that going for I don't know how long, there is still a legitimate like trade-off judgment to be made. If it is too long, then maybe what you're saying is still logically sound and the way to go. But
there's definitely
is there not in principle?
Right. I mean, there's a massive trade-off, and it's unfair. So, we already have euthanasia. We can already make species go extinct. But, that's just, it's something we can already do compared to, what you're suggesting, which is, godlike power, basically.
Yeah. But I guess the question is, why not aim for that instead of extinction?
Because it's impractical, it's unrealistic, and it's unfair to the victims that suffer in the meantime, right? If your project takes 1 million years, why should all of those victims have to suffer? They shouldn't. They shouldn't keep being forced into lives that they're not asking for, and would be better off not being forced into. So
I hear you.
That's wrong, and we can stop it, and we should.
But the reason I asked the question to begin with is because it I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth here. It sounded like you were doing a calculation in the way that you answered, such that it is possible that for the right the right result, you would willingly suffer. And if you are being rational in making that trade-off, then it is true that a rational, selfless, morally good agent would choose to suffer for the right result to be brought about. And so, though most of the agents in the world, most of the beings that are conscious in any way, aren't rational, if they were rational, and you're correct, then they might willingly suffer to bring about a conceptual paradise for future beings.
Right, but there's no ethical way to do that. To prioritize pleasure over safety from suffering, right? It's not an.
I don't think that's what I'm doing. I don't think I'm prioritizing pleasure over safety from suffering.
Well, it does sound like that, Brandon, right? We can already stop suffering today. We have the technology, okay? We don't have the technology to create, godlike powers and heaven, which is what you're suggesting. So, especially if you're trying to say that, we should just let the suffering continue while we work on this potentially impossible task, then it's an incredibly unethical and cruel and wrong thing to do.
So do you think that a universe with no conscious beings in it is better than a universe with conscious beings that cannot suffer because of the circumstances that have been secured for them? Is there one of those that's better?
I answer this every single time I do a stream. And the answer is the standard, the requirement is 100% safety from suffering, from things
that
going
is what
wrong.
I just put into both of those scenarios. Have that.
Yeah. So let me finish. If we can meet that standard, then that's fine. We can do it, and that's probably a good thing. But that seems extremely unrealistic and unlikely at this present time, and impractical to work towards. And we should work to prioritize the sufferers and their suffering and their safety. We can, again, euthanasia is already possible. We do it in large scale already. So it's the best way to protect life from suffering and from life, effectively.
Of the two options I put forward, is one better than the other? Or are they equal? Is it a neutral choice?
So, I like to use terms like hell and heaven because it really just simplifies the logic for me, especially because heaven, presumably would have 100% safety from extreme suffering. Maybe you'll stub your toe or something, but that, I think people could deal with that. Yes, I think, heaven would be preferable to absolute non-existence. But non-existence is preferable to hell, which is
and I'm not contesting
that we live in.
Yeah, I'm not contesting your logic on that. Okay, I think that what you just said is at least logically consistent. Yeah, for myself, as we've spoken before, I still think that the heaven is the one worth aiming for. Because it's better, it's the one worth aiming for. But and I don't think I'm doing that just
by just going for heaven. It's selfish, right? It's immoral. Because you're saying, screw all of these victims, let them suffer so that we can have fun.
Not necessarily, because if the victims were rational and could make the value judgment, they would likely willingly suffer for that aim.
You can't make that decision for them.
You're willing to make the decision for everyone to put them out of existence. So why not? Why can't we make that decision for them? It's the most rational choice to aim for the better thing.
Here's the answer, Brandon. The answer is because, again, your project will take far longer and cause far more suffering. So ours is the only one that says, we should do everything against suffering and prioritize the sufferers. Yours is saying we shouldn't do that. We should go after fun and pleasure at the direct expense of the victims.
I don't think that's exactly the trade-off, because
it is, though. It is, Brandon. You can't engineer heaven. in
Not
terms
in
of
my
what
lifetime. I
in
can't.
terms
You're
of
right.
what seems realistic at the minute, you're not going to be able to engineer heaven anytime soon. Whereas we can already do extinction. So if you're saying that they should suffer and just chill and everyone should be fine with watching all of these children get tortured so that we can have fun, no, it's not an ethical way forward. If you care about ethics, then you have to prioritize the sufferers. And we can still do the Heaven Project. So again, I answer this question every single time I stream. To be ethical, to be good, and to be moral, we have to use humanity's existence to end suffering, okay? And maybe at the end of all of this science and causing universe-wide extinction, maybe we'll be able to engineer heaven at some point, okay? So animals don't need to suffer in the meantime, right? They just don't.
Yeah, sure.
All of those animals, their suffering is needless, and you trying to say that we should just leave them to suffer? It's unnecessary.
No, I'm not saying that. So
your project.
I might be more aligned with you than you think, in that maybe the first step towards the project I'm proposing is that humans still exist, but they turn the Earth into a lifeless rock because there's a lot of suffering there, and that by narrowing the field of focus so that we optimize the conscious experience of less creatures, it becomes more achievable to produce actual heaven. Like, that's not out of the field of scope for me. I really am trying to entertain the suffering as being the thing that is what we should get rid of. I'm really trying to do that.
Well, yeah, I mean, we have to prioritize the sufferers, okay? Because suffering is too extreme and unacceptable to allow, okay? It's just far too bad to be permissible as a bargaining chip for pleasure, right? So again, it's wrong to do that. It's the definition of immoral, allowing needless suffering. So we have to prioritize the victims and the suffering, and if there's any room left over for the Heaven Project, then we can do it. But I mean, even in a religious way, which I'm not religious, you shouldn't go to heaven if you're a bad person, right? So you wouldn't deserve to get to that heaven if you're willing to torture children to get there. So, if there's time for heaven, then we can do it. But, realistically, humans are going to have to exist for a long time. If we can hand the mission over to robots and AI, then humanity would no longer have a reason to exist. In which case, and if there's still unsafe conditions for those humans, then human extinction would go ahead. However, even if that does happen in that scenario, the robots that are continuing the mission for the universe that don't need us, they might be able to continue, the heaven mission. And, there's no point having all of this life suffering where if you just really care about life existing and having fun, whereas you should care about safety from suffering as the priority. But if you really care about all of that pleasure so much, we can leave that to robots so that when there is 100% safety, or if that ever gets to be possible, then they can implement it. So life should only exist in safe conditions, in the best conditions. And it's just needless and unnecessary and cruel to have life suffering in unsafe conditions.
Yeah, okay. I think we agree more than maybe this conversation has implied, because the scenario you just played out with the robots doing the job, like, who knows, maybe they save the genetic code of every being and they're able to alter it such that suffering isn't even possible within the consciousness of those beings, and then they start to bring them into being in a safe environment that they've spent billions of years securing throughout the entire universe. Like, is that compatible with your vision? What I just put forward? Obviously, it's not perfect. I haven't thought it all through, but conceptually.
Conceptually, yes, but the standard will always have to be 100% safety.
Yes,
So, like,
I'm
as
not.
in,
I'm not
it's
compromising on that. I
not
agree.
even theoretically possible to go wrong at that point. So it would have to be like completely bulletproof.
Yep, I agree. Yes. Okay. Super interesting. Thanks for entertaining me, mate. I don't mean that like playfully, for having me on. Yeah, all the best.
No worries. And if you want to continue the conversation, you can join the movement on Discord. The link is at the bottom of the page on proextinction.com. But again, we have to think about the sufferers. They need help far more than anyone needs pleasure. The majority of stakeholders in existence and extinction, so just the entirety of existence, the stakeholders, those who have a stake in existence and what happens in the world, so everyone, the majority are in the future. The majority of lives are in the future. So, what that means is that those who don't exist yet, they don't need to exist, they don't want to exist, they don't have any need for survival. They're just a concept at this current time. Preventing them from existing isn't murder, it's not cruel, it's literally just, no one is affected, right? There's no one to be sad about it. No one suffers as a result of not being born, right? So it's not, a cruel thing or a bad thing to prevent lives from coming into existence. So again, they're not going to suffer from this, whereas those who would have suffered in life will be protected from suffering. So that's more important. Safety from suffering and from extreme suffering is more important than, conceptual lives being forced to exist as well, also into lives that they never asked for, and into unsafe conditions. So, people don't need to exist. Extinction isn't really about wiping out life. It's about preventing life and preventing future suffering. So, most of the people that are against it are saying, oh, what do you mean you're going to take away my privileges? You're going to take away my existence? And, it's a bit more understandable that existing people have a problem with not existing anymore. But, why should you care about future people that, don't need to exist? They don't need to be forced into existence. They have no needs or wants or desires, and they won't suffer from not being made to exist. They'll just be safe from suffering. If you care about the positive side, like Brandon did, if you care about joy and pleasure, the thing is, it's not necessary, right? There's no great evil that's going to happen if that just doesn't exist. If there's another universe over that way and it has no life, we're not going to cry about it. We're not going to be like, oh my God, there's an empty universe over there. There's no one having fun. All of those rocks are just tumbling about by themselves. Oh no. No one's going to care, right? Because you shouldn't care about life that doesn't exist, unless it's going to potentially suffer, in which case you should care. But, there's no need to cry over life that is, going to be prevented from potentially having pleasure in the future. They just exist as a concept at this current time. And again, the safety from suffering for those who are also in the future is more important. So, even if we had a living person and a suffering person and we had to euthanize both of them, right, that's still the right thing to do to prevent more suffering. But we're not even talking about, euthanizing, really. The majority of stakeholders here, they don't even exist. So, why should anyone care about their lack of pleasure? And, if you do care about pleasure, then you should really fight, and you do value life, then you should fight for it to be in safe conditions only, right? Why would you want life to exist in unsafe conditions where it is going to suffer, it is going to have a bad time? Children will be tortured to death en masse, which is what happens in nature, in the wild. The vast majority of wild animals get tortured to death. Over 99.9% of wild animals get eaten alive as children and babies. It's not something you would want to experience. Imagine having, wolves eating your eyes out and, just helping themselves to all of your body parts, and, the pain, the terror, the anguish, the suffering, it's just so extreme. And we're talking about children and babies having to experience that. That is what most life born onto this planet experiences. So most people are just thinking about humanity. Humans don't even suffer that badly compared to animals. We're not getting eaten alive. We're not naked in a forest running for our lives. We're just not. That's a far, far worse experience. So, we shouldn't look away from that. We shouldn't minimize it. And we shouldn't try to say it's acceptable to torture others to get to, to have fun, to have pleasure. You can't have any sort of ethics if you're, willing to exploit others for fun and for the sake of pleasure. Now, in terms of, what Brandon was kind of getting at, how much should we value life and pleasure? Does it have any value? Basically, no. It doesn't have any value when it's in relation to suffering and in comparison to suffering. So in the same way that, the exhilaration of running into traffic and trying to dodge the cars might be fun for some crazy people, the safety is more important, right? You don't want to get hit by a car, you don't want to end up in the hospital, so you prioritize your safety. There's lots of things that we prioritize our safety over, even if it's going and asking a girl out on a date, right? Most people, especially if they're a bit shy, they'll prioritize their mental health, their safety, their ego, whatever, over actually going and doing it. So, all life is about avoiding suffering. It's about safety. We live in a very dangerous world, really. It's full of dangers and full of unsafe conditions. And obviously, the thing is that humans really live in a bubble. We don't really live in situations where our safety is threatened to any serious degree. Now, obviously we do, but most people, they're not having constant danger in their life. Most people are sat at home, they've got the heating on, they've got computers, televisions, and they're not suffering. They're not running for their lives all day, every day. They're not struggling and fighting to survive and, fighting for every last scrap of food. They're not, freezing overnight because they don't have shelter like wild animals do. So humans don't really understand how bad suffering is because they've been sheltered from it. So people live in a bubble of luxury, and then they have the nerve to say, animals should keep suffering. People that are suffering worse than me, they should keep suffering. It's incredibly cruel and immoral. All of these people that say, life should continue to suffer, children should keep being tortured, everyone should keep getting cancer, these animals should keep being eaten alive as children. They're literally sat, in their comfy sofas with Netflix and snacks, and they have the nerve to just say, yeah, everyone should keep suffering. I'm fine, but I think they should keep suffering. So that's gross. It's extremely gross and immoral and exploitative. And even Brandon, he's not really on the right side of it. You're focusing on the pleasure of the privileged instead of those that are being murdered and eaten alive, right? It's not a responsible or ethical approach to prioritize the privileged over the unprivileged, right? It's wrong, it's gross, and nobody needs pleasure, nobody needs heaven, nobody needs any of that stuff. It's just an unnecessary privilege, right? Compared to victims being tortured, it has no value in comparison, right? The safety from suffering that life deserves and that we can provide with extinction is infinitely more important than any shallow pleasures that people like that are chasing after. They're not thinking about the victims. They don't care about the sufferers. The suffering could be, infinitely worse than it is right now, and they still wouldn't give a damn. So these people aren't ethical. They're not responsible. And the ones that keep saying, but how do we know that the balance? What about joy, though, right? These people aren't even beginning to think about an ethical and responsible approach to life, because they are inherently saying, I'm cool with children being tortured to death. I'm fine with it, right? If our arcade and our pleasure machine requires the blood of babies, then I'm happy with it, right? I can ignore them. I can just put them out of my mind, and I can get back to that pleasure. That's all I care about, right? Even if this machine is, torturing babies to death and getting them raped to death and all sorts of terrible things, people like Brandon would be fine with that. So that's pretty wrong. That's not what we're about at the pro-extinction movement. We are against pleasure machines that run on babies being tortured. No, it's not hyperbole. Most life born on this planet will get tortured to death as a baby. That's just a statistical fact. The vast majority of life on this planet is born into nature as wild animals, and most of them die before reaching maturity. So it's not a good life. You wouldn't want to live it. You wouldn't want your mother to live that, or anyone you care about to be forced to suffer and die a horrible death like that. The deaths that you get in nature are the worst. You don't have a hospital bed. You don't have any pain medication. You watch your family get eaten alive, and then you're next. Not a nice experience. And yet that's the majority experience, the most common one. So, we live in a world where over 99.9% of life is getting tortured horrifically, and people are saying it's fine, we shouldn't care about it, just let it continue, safety from suffering isn't important, pleasure is more important, my privilege is more important, let them suffer, they deserve to suffer. We live in an evil society. Where am I getting that number from? That's from our research, and you can actually chat GPT it or use any other AI, and it will tell you the facts. Yeah, so over 99.9% of life does die a painful death during childhood. It's probably higher than 99.9%, because again, the number of animals that get born each year, and life that gets born each year on Earth, is it's an astronomical number. It's more than trillions. It's more than quadrillions. It's actually more than dectillions. It's like 20 zeros basically each year that are born and die painfully during childhood. So the numbers are absolutely wild and ridiculously large. And, that's what we live in. We live in a world where all of these innocent lives are being tortured and everyone's okay with it. Like this guy, Zach, in the chat right now. He's trying to say that, animals should suffer, and, 98% suffering is okay, 99%, maybe that's too much. No, even 1% of life suffering is too much. Suffering is too extreme and terrible to be acceptable. It's not something that can be traded for the pleasure of others who don't need that pleasure, right? You don't need to have fun, but you do need safety from suffering. So the queue has been empty for a while. Maybe I need to change my background to say come and debate me or something. Because since I've been using this background, I've not been getting many people request to join. However, if you have questions, if you want to have a discussion, now's the time to hit that button and come up. So who are you to cast determinism over nature itself? I mean, it sounds like a philosophy, intelligent person, shall we say. If you need further justification for why children being tortured is a bad thing and is unacceptable, then there's something wrong with you. That's pretty easy, Zach, Take up your gripe with lions. What use would that do, Zach? We're taking up the issue of forced existence and suffering itself. So that's what we should do. That's what we are doing. Well, thanks for joining, Ricky. Consider joining us on Discord. The movement has a website, proextinction.com, the Discord server, the WhatsApp server. Links are all at the bottom of the page. Come and do activism with us, spread the message, and help us solve the problem of humans resisting extinction. There's lots of ways that we can solve that problem, but growing the movement is what we're doing. Primarily, we're getting more people on board who understand that suffering is bad and unacceptable, and that extinction is the best way to end suffering, to protect life, and from nature and unsafe conditions. Life doesn't deserve to be forced to exist in cruel conditions, which is what we have now. And obviously animals, they come first because they suffer worse than we do and in higher numbers. So we should have a fair system, and a fair system will make sure that no one suffers, right? A fair system is about suffering first, safety first, making sure that everyone is safe from suffering and that you don't have life being tortured in cruel conditions. So what's our movement doing? Well, our movement is working to actually end all suffering. Nobody else is doing it. Extinction is the best way to do it. It's the most effective way to protect life from suffering, from being forced to exist, and all of the terrors within life in nature and in existence at large. And if we don't do that, then we're condemning innocents to continue suffering for billions of more years, which is just wrong. Hello, how's it going?
Yo, brother, how are you, bro?
I'm good, thank you.
Yeah, I got a question. Don't you think that suffering is an important part of life?
No.
Why not?
Suffering might benefit a few lucky people here and there, but for most, suffering is a bad thing. If you get cancer, you don't think, oh wow, I've won the jackpot. I'm gonna really benefit from this.
Yes, I understand that, but I mean, like, so, how can I say it? I think that suffering is important to us because of evolution. If you don't have suffering in life, then you can't become better.
I agree with that. So yeah, absolutely. Suffering and pain, hunger, other things like that. They're absolutely essential to survival and to evolution. Yeah. Positive and negative motivations and inputs like pain were absolutely crucial for evolution, for survival of the fittest. If you have no pain, then you don't know when you're hungry. You don't know when you just stabbed yourself by accident and now you're bleeding and you have to take care of it. You don't know any of that stuff. So it's very helpful for evolution. But evolution is just a word. It doesn't have feelings. The ones that suffer do, and we should prioritize them.
So because you want to prioritize the people that are suffering, you are thinking of killing everybody, unaliving everybody.
I mean, it's actually kind of a bad framing, really, to say prioritize the unlucky ones, because it's really about providing safety from life for all life. So even the billionaires, everyone benefits from non-existence, from the safety that you get from it. You get infinite safety from suffering. So that's an infinitely good thing. And so it's not about killing or wiping out life. It's euthanasia is the way to cause extinction. But most of our mission is about preventing life from coming back on Earth and on other planets and the rest of the universe.
And to you, what does life mean to you? Like, why are we living? Why do you think that we are on Earth and experiencing what we are experiencing?
Yeah, so I don't think there's any sort of God that had anything to do with it, or any sort of spiritual stuff. Why would a God, have babies being tortured to death? Even if there is one, it's not one that I would care about or follow. We're still going to be fighting against suffering and forced existence, no matter what other stuff is going on. Doesn't matter what the scenario is. We're never going to be okay with children being tortured or anyone suffering. But so no, I don't think life is some special thing. It's more of a mistake. It's effectively a natural process, a natural phenomenon. And that means that it comes about without any sort of morality, without any safety, any safeguards, nothing. In fact, it's the opposite. Life coming about from nature, as it has done, ensures the worst suffering and the worst conditions, right? The most unsafe conditions. That's what nature is. It's cruelty, it's suffering, and it's an unfortunate natural phenomenon that would be better off not existing and not generating suffering. So that's what our mission is at the Pro-Extinction Movement. It's to tackle that.
Okay, but it's like you're focusing a lot on the negative things because everyone experiences suffering.
Well, safety comes first, right?
Safety, of course, yeah, it does.
So that's why. If you don't focus on the negatives, like you're saying, then what happens? People suffer, right? If you ignore safety and you're happy for things to be unsafe, then what happens? Innocents gets suffered terribly, horrifically. So that's not an okay thing. We should prioritize safety from suffering.
Okay, yes, I understand, but still, I think like there are many ways to to prevent suffering, and extinction doesn't has to be like the only.
So we've looked into it, and extinction is the only way to end suffering and to prevent it. The alternative is you would need godlike powers, basically. There's no other way to guarantee safety from suffering.
That's well, if that's your opinion, I think like.
Well, no, it's just a fact, right? I mean, that's an undeniable fact. You can't provide 100% safety from suffering without effectively, godlike powers.
No, I think
you can't guarantee that your child is going to have a good life, right? They could develop chronic pain. They could develop all sorts of horrible diseases. They could get kidnapped. You can't guarantee that life is going to have a good life, but you can guarantee that it won't be suffering if you just stop it from being forced to exist, right? None of these lives asked for it. They're being forced into lives they never asked for, bodies that they never asked for, situations that they never asked for, and then ultimately extreme suffering that they don't deserve to experience.
Yeah, I think you are focusing a lot on the extreme cases because like
it's not extreme cases, because actually this is what happens to the majority of life. So it's the opposite of extreme cases. Most life born onto this planet will die a painful death during childhood, if you include animals.
Okay, yeah, I understand, but I mean, like, that's like nature. I mean, you can't live forever. Everybody has to die at some point. And I do understand that, yeah, it's suffering, but also because of suffering, you can value the good things in life. It's like
Right,
such a
but
part
you know,
of,
if you have to torture children to do it, then it's not acceptable.
yeah, but again, that's a,
No, there is
it's
no
not like,
but. There is no yeah, but. There is just yeah. Children shouldn't be tortured for fun.
yeah, I know children shouldn't be tortured, but it's not like every child that you see is tortured.
Right, but the
That's not
ones that do
acceptable.
get tortured, you don't see them because they're not in the street having a great time. They're not, playing in the street and they're all happy. They're in dungeons or they're being killed, right? So you're ignoring the victims with an out of sight, out of mind mentality, which basically condemns them to suffer. So that's a cruel thing. It's wrong. And it's immoral.
Okay. Okay, yeah. If that's your opinion, bro.
Well, yeah, it's just my opinion, bro, that children shouldn't be tortured to death. Whatever, bro, I guess. If you think that that's a crazy opinion, well, I would say no. You're the crazy one, saying that children should be tortured, right? They should be made to suffer terribly, because in the same way that the victimizer might have some pleasure out of it, the victim suffers. That's a good balance for you. No, it's a disgusting balance. It's a cruel balance, unacceptable balance. The pro-suffering position allows for infinite suffering. It's a position that's not thought out. It's a position that's infinitely immoral and infinitely exploitative, because it's a position which says it doesn't matter how many children are tortured, my privilege is more important. It doesn't matter how many innocents are made to suffer for me, my fun justifies all of that torture. So what are we talking about here, Miranda? We're talking about extinctionism and those who are against it and why it's wrong to be against it. Extinctionism is the ideology that life is better off not being around, that life is actually the ultimate harm, that life is violence. For most life that gets forced to exist on this planet, they get tortured and a cruel, painful death during childhood. So, to be on the side of that happening, to be on the side of saying, yes, 99.9% of life gets tortured to death as children, but, I kind of like it. To be on the side of that, you've got to be seriously evil. The pro-extinction movement, proextinction.com, we are a movement that says that no one should suffer. It's unacceptable for children to be tortured. So does life need to be wiped out? Yeah, without total extinction, you're just going to keep having more lives forced into lives that they didn't ask for and suffering and being imprisoned in effectively hell. So it's the ultimate bad, it's the ultimate wrong, it's the ultimate evil. There is nothing worse than being forced into a life that you didn't ask for and then experiencing extreme suffering. I would challenge you guys to suggest something that could be worse than that, because there is literally nothing worse than that. It's the worst thing in the world. And yet people that are against extinction are in favor of continuing to condemn the vast majority of life to torture and extraordinarily extreme suffering. So, even if it was just, a minority that was suffering, we would still say that it's incredibly wrong and unethical and evil, and that we should stop it. But we don't even, these pro-suffering people, they don't even have that luxury. They don't even have that privilege of saying that it's a minority and that we should just ignore them and keep exploiting them. It's actually the majority of life that they're happy to exploit and to condemn to literally unlimited suffering. So, But again, even if there was just a tiny minority suffering, that's still unacceptable, it's still unnecessary, and it's too terrible and bad to allow. Zach is trying to get personal now because he's getting desperate in the chat. Do better, Zach. You know, I really think you can do better than that. Use logic. You know, these personal attacks, they're desperate. Try and do better. Hello.
Does the sound work? Does it work? Does the
Yes.
sound work?
Yep,
Yay.
loud and clear.
Thank you for being so generous and holding me up here. That's a wonderfully controversial claim you are making. Tell me more about it.
Yes.
Is there a difference between the suffering of children or the suffering of a duck? Where's the difference? Why should I stop living because children suffer and their suffering is worth less than my suffering, which I want to experience? This doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, so we're not calling for humans to go extinct until after animal extinction. So for now, we need a strong humanity, a healthy humanity. If humans go extinct first, then they can't help end animal suffering. So we want animals to go extinct. We want to do universe-wide extinction, and then finally
difference. Now you are telling me about what humans should do. I was asking about the difference between suffering.
You asked why you should stop existing, and I'm saying that we're not encouraging that.
What's the difference? No, seriously, what is the difference?
I think lots of different animals have different experiences, different capacities for experience. Some people argue that humans are more capable of experiencing worse suffering, which I'm not sure about that, because humans actually have a lot of coping mechanisms for suffering that animals probably don't have. And
have you asked an animal about its suffering? Have you talked about an animal? Has it said, "Oh man, I woke up today"?
Well, no, that's the thing. That's the thing.
I'm asking you to never cut me off again. So the animal would say to you.
So, obviously you can't talk to animals. They're the most vulnerable life forms on the planet. And instead of assuming that they're okay, like that guy was suggesting, that's an irresponsible position to take. We should assume the worst, or at least prepare for the worst, right? And account for the worst. So, he was trying to say, we can't ask an animal if it's suffering and therefore they don't suffer. That doesn't make sense. We can't ask animals if they suffer, but we know that they do, right? And we know that even when they experience extreme suffering, they still can't communicate that. So, that's actually in favor of extinction, right? That they're so vulnerable that it's actually hard to know when they are suffering because they can't actually speak out about it. So, they have extreme unsafety and, lack of, safeties in that sense, which is all the more reason for extinction. Hello, how's it going?
Hello.
Hello.
I would say that I'm willing to put up with the suffering if it means that, I'll have a good life, some moments of greatness,
But, would you torture a child for that?
That's not happening, bro.
It is, though. Most life born on this planet gets effectively tortured.
How, though? How?
Lots of different ways, right? There's lots of different types of suffering, lots of different forms of it. Lots of different types, obviously.
I mean, even the poorest kid in the worst slum in India, has a great day sometimes.
You don't know that? I
mean, I know some poor people in my own life, and they do have some great moments.
Okay, but that you're focusing on the positives here, and you're essentially ignoring the full picture, right?
I mean, the full picture is that even though your life could be so bad, so bad, which is, I mean, I guess a lot of people, like the majority of this planet, is not like living in great conditions. So you have a point there, but still,
It's not about the majority, though. No children should be tortured just so that others can have fun.
no, they have fun too. Like, and they don't get like who gets tortured
Martin,
like that
when you
though,
say
bro.
they have fun, the kids being tortured, they're not having fun. Okay,
They're not being tortured, bro. Like, what do you mean? Like, do you actually mean like kids
Martin,
being tortured by people?
most life born on this planet dies painfully as a child. Okay, so that's not an acceptable thing. It's not fair. It's incredibly cruel.
What are you saying? Most deaths are kids in this world?
Yeah,
How?
if you include animals.
If you include animals, yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
So they get tortured and they don't have like the chance to get out of that situation, I guess, like most.
Animals are basically food on legs. They're walking food, okay? So the easiest ones are the children. And that's why over 99% of life gets eaten alive as a child or as a baby. So it's a horrible experience. Imagine having your eyes ripped out, your guts ripped out in front of you, the pain, the terror, the fear, the mental distress. And sometimes it takes several hours. Sometimes baby birds, for example, get eaten alive by ants. And that can take an entire day of the bird still being alive while being eaten alive.
Yeah, that I've actually seen that happen.
Yeah, so, it's not something you would want to experience. And it's not something anyone should have to experience.
So the answer is to like just extinction, man? Like that kind of it.
So the thing is that extinction is the best way to protect life from suffering. It's something we can already do. Euthanasia already exists. And anything else is unfairly condemning innocents to suffer for no reason, right? Just for the continuation of the species, just for the sake of it, right? There's no actual good reason for it. And, you should have a good reason if you're willing to condemn children to be tortured to death.
I mean, the good reason, I guess, that the natural world has for it is exactly what you said, like continuation of the species.
But that's not a good reason, though. That's just nature.
Yeah, and I guess it doesn't have to be good or bad, right? Like it's just nature.
I would say that nature is bad by default. Yeah, okay, it doesn't have opinions or anything, but it by default
like,
does
just the way of life.
Worst suffering.
But I guess, like the world, how it's designed, like with all the creatures in it, yeah, it is designed for suffering for a lot of them. But don't you think like there are other, like a whole lot of other animals, humans, or whatever that do prosper?
But I mean, that's kind of like an evil position to take, though, right? I mean, let's imagine you were
willing for the majority to prosper.
Let's imagine that you're a really evil person for a second, right? That's exactly the kind of thing you would say. Yeah, all these children should keep being tortured to death just because, I feel like it, right? I don't have a good reason. I don't care about children being tortured, and I think it's acceptable. I think it's okay. I don't worry about it. I don't care about it. That's an evil position to take. There's no way for it to be a good position because you're saying, yeah, it's acceptable to exploit and torture children.
I guess, like, yeah, animals, they don't have opinions. Like, yeah, they cannot like rationalize this.
Yeah, and Martin, I don't think any animal is having a good life. Like literally any of them. Okay, even the lucky ones, right? Like a house cat. A lot of the time, they live in perpetual boredom. They live in fear. They are unable to carry out their what they want to do, right? So they want to be doing their natural functions, but they can't. like hunting and stuff like that. And, as I was just saying, if they're suffering, if they're in pain, if they're bored, if they're depressed, for example, they can't tell you, right? You'll never know.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, I
That's
guess
the
you'll
problem.
never know.
You've got to go.
I have to go.
Okay, no worries. Thank you for coming on, Martin. Take care. But yeah, so like, I don't think any animals are really having a good time. Even the lucky ones, it's very borderline if they're actually having a life that they're happy with. But for wild animals, I'd say it's absolutely unquestionable that none of them have a good life. They've got parasites, diseases, they have no shelter, no medicine, no reliable food source, they've got dirty water, they're being hunted by murderous, terrifying animals all day, every day. If you've ever had a nightmare where you were chased by a murderer, imagine that being your all day, everyday experience, and then it only ends by getting eaten alive. That is quite literally what most life experiences. So, it's pretty bad. And, animals don't deserve to suffer. Even this background here, right? This is basically what pro-lifers or pro-suffering people picture when they think of animals. But this is completely unrealistic. This doesn't actually happen. This is a fantasy. It's a dream. Okay? They're not all just chilling and having a great time. They don't even have the mental capacity to have a great time. But they certainly don't have the conditions to have a great time either. They starve to death, they get eaten alive, they're hunted, they're chased. You wouldn't want to live in nature. You definitely wouldn't. And you wouldn't want to be an animal either. If someone said, right, you can be a wild mouse, would you take that up? I don't think you would, right? Where are you going to sleep? What are you going to eat? How are you going to be safe? What diseases and parasites are you going to get and be forced to put up with? Are you going to lose an eye, lose a limb, and have to suffer through immense pain? Yeah. So we've got people in the chat saying the host is evil, the host is a psychopath, but I'm the one saying that children don't deserve to be tortured to death, and you guys are the ones saying that they do. So who's really the bad guy here? Is it the one saying nobody should have to suffer, nobody should be tortured? Or is it you guys who are saying, children being tortured is fine, we don't mind it, why upset the apple cart? Zach, you have no leg to stand on, really. And you say you enjoy living. We're not asking you to stop. So, you have no argument. You're just a ridiculous person. Right, hello.
Oh, there you are. I'm so glad you finally called me up, because it seems you've just been arguing with children, and it seems you're just kind of mentally unstable. So let's start at the beginning. Where is your expertise that all of humanity in existence is suffering? Where's your proof? Don't worry.
That's your first mistake. That's your first mistake, right? You come on.
No. Your first mistake is assuming that everyone is having a bad time. If you're having a bad time, feel free.
All right. That's your first mistake. It explains why you're obviously unintelligent. We're not saying that everyone is having a bad time. And the people like that person that just came on, accusing us of insane things, that's out of desperation, because we're not actually advocating or making statements like those crazy claims that he wanted to come on and accuse me of. We're not saying that everyone is suffering right now. We're not saying that every single person is begging for it to end. That would be obviously inaccurate, and it's desperate and pathetic attempts like that people against extinction have to resort to, because they can't actually argue with what we're actually saying. So they have to make up things that we're saying that we're not saying, and then argue with that. So, that's, we're not going to take that seriously. And looks like we might... No, the queue is empty. Oh, no. Hello.
Hi.
How's it going? You all right? Do you have any questions for us today?
Animal shelter.
What do you mean? Okay, I think they might have been a child, so it's probably best that they're not on this stream. Animal shelters, do they help? Let's talk about it. Why not? Animal shelter is probably a good thing, yeah, but most animals don't get shelter. So, we shouldn't celebrate the shelter that a very, very small minority of animals get, and ignore the vast majority who don't get any kind of shelter, who don't get any kind of good conditions. It is a fantasy that animals should continue to exist. It's a fantasy that people have. They don't care about the animals themselves. They just think that nature is pretty cool to look at and kind of interesting. So effectively, they're willing to use animals for entertainment and to condemn them to, quite literally, and I'm not exaggerating, the worst suffering in the world, right? So, obviously the other guest was saying, you can't say that everyone's suffering, and we're not saying that. But we are saying that lots of people are suffering, lots of animals are suffering, most animals suffer terribly, and, included within all of suffering is the worst suffering in the world. So, we're not talking really about stubbed toes here, we're talking about being eaten alive, we're talking about extreme pain, extreme mental, disabilities, physical disabilities, agony, chronic pain, chronic severe depression, anxiety, brain damage, right? Being eaten alive, starving to death, loneliness, all of these things are terrible, and they only exist because nature, benefited from it, found that life was more likely to survive and reproduce if it suffered. Because that suffering is information, right? It's, oh, I'm hungry, I should eat. Oh, that hurt, I won't touch that again. So you benefit from that pain. But the thing is that most don't actually benefit from it. For most, it's just a torture system, and it only benefits the lucky ones. So that system of suffering and pain, it actually only benefits a very small minority, whereas for the majority, that system ends up being a torture device, a torture system, a prison, one that you can't escape, right? Animals have no concept of opting out, right? They can only flee from suffering. They can't just starve themselves to death. Sure, it happens sometimes, but in most cases, the suffering and the hunger and all of these other things absolutely overwhelm any sort of rational decision that an animal can make to opt out, right? That's not a real thing in the vast majority of cases. So it's just a prison, and it tortures them, and it's not like a good thing for them. It merely just gets more, helps them to propagate the species. That's it. It's actually, so it's not for the sake of the animal or the human, right? That suffering isn't there to benefit them. It's just to make them survive long enough to reproduce. It doesn't care what the conditions are. It can be terrible. It usually is. So, only a tiny, tiny minority benefits from it. Right, the queue is still empty. If you're interested in a conversation, a discussion, then now's your chance. We're all about interesting conversations on this stream, but the main reason for this stream is to grow the movement, get more activists on board, and to help us work to actually end all suffering. Extinction is the only way to do that. Without total extinction, you can't end all suffering. So it's the right thing to do. It's the best way to protect life from suffering and from the cruelties of life and the unsafe conditions they're in. It's the best way to protect life from being forced into lives of, cruelty, that they didn't want, that they'd be better off not being born into. And we should prioritize safety from suffering. We should prioritize safety from bad lives, terrible lives. And yeah, if we have to forgo joy and pleasure because safety is more important, then yeah, we should do that. Again, even if it was a minority that was suffering, it would still be cruel and unnecessary and evil to make them suffer for our benefit, right? Their safety still takes priority. My fun, my privilege is not more important than the safety of others. Okay, so get that through your head. That's what it's about. Safety is paramount. Safety is more important. The people against extinction are against safety, right? They are literally advocating for an unfair system, a cruel system, one that they can exploit, one that they can take advantage of. That's all they care about, right? So when you actually put this into their face, they squirm, they get angry, like that Tess guy in the chat, right? Because they resort to desperate tactics and defense mechanisms, essentially. So is there any specific reason you are the face of the movement here on TikTok? Yeah, it's a decent question, I guess. We've got Renee doing live streams just like myself in German. We're going to try and get Renee to sort of step it up to English because they're not getting as good of a response as I am. We've got a few Indians trying to get onto TikTok. However, TikTok is banned in India, so they're struggling with that, not really having much success finding a solution. So, we're constantly recruiting new people. And in fact, just in the last week, we've had quite a lot of activists join our Discord, join our WhatsApp and say, I want to join the movement. I agree. We live in a crazy world where people think that suffering is acceptable and exploitation is acceptable. No, I agree we should have a suffering-free world. That's the priority. We should prioritize the victims and the sufferers, and their safety is more important than the fun of some lucky and selfish people, right? So, okay, OG Ty wants to come up. It's always an interesting conversation. Let's hear what they have to say today. Hello.
Oh, hello. You alright?
I'm good, how are you?
Yeah, I'm alright. Bro, I just really want to just ask about suffering itself, because this whole movement, right? If suffering isn't if you don't see it as bad in itself, then this movement is kind of pointless, technically. So I was gonna ask, because I don't see suffering as bad in itself, right? So why do you see suffering as bad in itself, and not the judgment about suffering?
Well, it's just obvious, right? I mean, we use the words good and bad, for simple things like that, and they don't need to be overly defined, overly complicated. We can say that we can confidently say that a child being tortured to death is a bad thing, right? It's bad for the child, obviously, so it's bad.
But if say, okay, not using that example, yeah, say I don't know, you had an injury, right, and you're suffering because you can't walk properly, yeah. Then if that was me, right, I know it kind of depends on your mentality and stuff like that. But me suffering, I don't see it as bad in itself. You know what I mean? I see it as like physical pain, because I feel like physical pain, I don't attach that to bad in itself. You know what I mean? So I think I don't see like.
Then you're not using the word bad correctly, basically.
So, what would you use the word bad correctly in then? What would you attach that to?
Well, it's obvious, isn't it? You know, if I spill a drink on the floor, that's a bad thing, right? Things that cause suffering are bad, effectively. Now, you could say that things that prevent happiness are also bad, sure, but they're not as bad as things that actually cause suffering, right? Suffering is worse than the absence of happiness, I would say.
Well, what would you define like suffering as?
I mean, again, we don't need to define suffering. It's just bad experiences. You know, it's pain. It's things that you don't want to experience. And you know, when you look at it on a spectrum, it becomes much easier to answer that question. You know, imagine the worst life that's ever been lived. It would have to be pretty shocking to qualify as the worst one ever. And I think we can all agree that, you know, they probably suffered pretty terribly.
But if there's no definition of it though, then you can just say it's like subjective though. That's what I'm saying. Like if you don't have a definition of it, I'm not saying it has to be like complicated or anything. But then surely it's not like, you see what I'm trying to say?
But the thing is, that's only you're appealing to effectively people that struggle with comprehension, right? So our movement needs smart people, intelligent people, people that struggle with the concept of, you know, is a baby being tortured to death good or bad? I really can't decide. They're probably not going to be helpful to the movement.
No, I'm not talking about situations. I'm saying suffering though, in itself, right?
Right, but a baby being tortured to death obviously does suffer, right? So, you know, for people that are wondering if that's suffering or wondering if it's bad or not, I would say that is a massive cognitive impairment.
No, because hear me out, right? It's the judgment about suffering is bad in itself. Suffering itself, right? If you go through physical pain and stuff, and if you don't attach that to suffering, then
what?
Then it's not like bad in itself. You wouldn't see it. The person wouldn't see it as bad in itself, and then therefore
we don't need to play word games. We don't need mental gymnastics, right? You know, you see a child being tortured, you know it's a bad thing, right? If you struggle with that, then you're going to struggle with other simple concepts like 1 + 1 = 2. And for those people who really just can't understand that children being tortured is a bad thing, you know, we say go and live your life, right? Just forget about it. Don't worry. You know, if you're really struggling that hard to understand basic things, then don't worry about it. Go and have fun.
Okay, well, as well, right? You say that like extinction will end like all suffering, right?
Yeah.
And you know that like eventually nature will come back. So surely it's like, I know you're saying this for the greater good, right?
Right, but as I always say, you know, the biggest part of our mission and our project is to prevent life from developing. So, you know, causing total extinction is a tiny minority of the mission. It's a tiny minority of the time scale that we're working with in the universe. You know, it's about prevention, and you know, even if it takes us 100,000 years to be able to find a way to prevent life from developing on a planet, that's still the right thing to do, because it's going to prevent billions of years of suffering.
I don't know, man. I think, right? It's just you're trying to like objectify suffering without objectifying at the same time, and I just think
you're trying to philosophize about it when you don't need to.
No, I'm not. I'm just saying suffering isn't bad in itself.
I mean,
that's a valid statement. Like, right? You can't read like.
Look, you can say that suffering isn't bad for lucky people. Right? You know, if I'm getting told off and I'm getting punished for something I did wrong, right? And you know, I suffer from it, and then I realize, okay, yeah, I did the wrong thing, I'll go and apologize, then maybe that suffering, had some place, had some benefit. But most suffering is like getting cancer, right? You don't think, oh, I don't know if I haven't decided if I like my cancer yet.
No,
I haven't gotten
it's
to know it yet. We're still introducing each other.
right. So we use cancer as an example, right? I get cancer, and in your view, like I'm suffering, right? But what I'm saying is, in my view, cancer, me getting cancer, right? That's not bad. That's a dispreferred indifferent, right?
Look, the word
That's
bad exists to be used, okay?
Yeah,
And
vice
so
is bad.
you're effectively saying we shouldn't use the word for its only
No,
actual use.
I'm saying vice is the only bad, right, in life, right? That's the only evil, and I'm saying I don't think suffering is evil in itself. Virtue is the only good. Everything else is an indifferent, right? There's preferred, dispreferred indifference, and there's vice. That's the only thing.
Appreciate your questions. Luke in the chat is asking, is the website getting more traffic? Yes, actually. Just today, I was looking at the Google Analytics for our website, proextinction.com, and yeah, it's been getting more traffic. I had a really big TikTok video, got 70k views. That's a lot for me. That helped spike the traffic a lot. Let me try and pull it up right now, because I've got my computer behind the screen. But yeah, check out our website, proextinction.com. You can join our Discord server and our WhatsApp server. Join the movement. Become an activist. Help us work to end all suffering. As you can see from most people that come onto the stream, most people are in favor of suffering continuing, in favor of children being tortured and horrible things like that continuing indefinitely and without limitation. So those people are evil. That's most people, unfortunately. Help us fight against all of this cruelty and abuse. Help us fight for the victims. Be on the side of the sufferers, not the selfish, privileged and cruel people like those that are spamming my chat right now. Like this Zoe person, this Tess person, people that are advocating for children to be tortured. They should be put away, really, and they shouldn't be taken seriously. There's something very wrong with these people that think that torture is okay, that children deserve it. They don't, right? Children don't deserve to be tortured. Animals don't deserve to be tortured. And the people in the chat are monsters, basically, for trying to defend suffering, defend extreme suffering. I'd say that they're basically sadists. No, Tess, you're the dangerous one. You're the one that's saying that it's okay to let others suffer, to make them suffer, to exploit their suffering. So we're the ones saying that that's not okay. And if you think that's dangerous, then that just proves how bad of a person you are. Anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. I'm going to take a break for a bit. But in the meantime, join us on Discord. Me and the rest of the team, the rest of us activists, we are always on Discord and happy to answer questions at any time of day. So the link is at the bottom of our website, proextinction.com. You can also read our manifesto, our FAQ, learn more about us, get involved in activism. Help us stand up for the victims of suffering and forced existence, because people like this Tess, gross person in the chat, they're not going to do it. They're actually advocating, for it to continue, for children to keep being tortured and suffering. So those people are gross, they're wrong, and no child deserves to suffer. No child deserves to suffer so that others can have fun. It's unnecessary, it's wrong, it's cruel. And our mindset, our mentality should be that it's never enough. Fighting to end suffering and help others be safe from suffering, it's never enough. So it doesn't get to a point where we say, right, I've done enough now, I can't be bothered to help them with their suffering anymore. I have to focus on myself. We're against that kind of thing. We're people that are motivated by the suffering of others. So, we're against that selfish mentality of, but what about me and my privilege? You may be suffering, but, other people are suffering worse, animals are suffering worse, and therefore their suffering takes priority over yours, right? It takes priority over mine, right? Children are being tortured to death. Animals are being tortured. They are suffering terribly, right? They're suffering worse than I am. So unless I'm willing to help them, then I'm being selfish, right? That's what it's about. We should be selfless, and as long as there's suffering out there, that should be our priority. Okay? That's what it's about. So prioritize the sufferers, prioritize the victims and their safety from suffering. Total extinction is the only way to do that. Just think about it. If we don't have total extinction, then there's going to be new life forms being forced to exist, right? That's needless. That's unnecessary. And they're going to be forced to suffer. So why should we do that? People are just obsessed with the continuation of the species, but there's no actual thought behind it. There's no logic behind it. Stop caring about the pointless continuation of the species, and let's have some actual real values and principles to work with here. It's nature, right? That's a meaningless statement. It literally means nothing. So let's work with stuff that actually does have meaning, that makes sense, okay? So don't just say, it's just life, okay? Yes, it is life, but it's terrible and we should stop it. If you're going to use things like, it's just nature, it's just life, then you need to go into further detail about why that means, in your view, that children should be tortured. If you're going to advocate for children to be tortured, you need a good reason for it. The random and pointless continuation of the species is not a good enough reason. Why should the species continue? It doesn't need to, right? It only benefits the lucky ones who are privileged, and you just have to look at these disgusting comments in the chat to see the kinds of people that they are. They're selfish. They're happy to condemn others to suffer. They are the first ones to downplay the suffering of others and to pretend it's not that bad, to lie about it not being that bad. How much more evil could you possibly get? You couldn't really, you couldn't. So join the good side, join the good people, be a good person, fight to end all suffering, fight for a suffering-free world, and fight to, end the privilege of the lucky exploiters, and defend the victims of suffering from them, right? These monsters in the chat, they're saying, all of these children should be tortured, animals should continue to suffer. Help us defend the animals and the victims from people like, Tess in the chat, who think that suffering is a good thing and that torture is a good thing. These crazy people, these sadistic people are basically running the world. They represent the majority opinion, the status quo. So we have to fight to end this system of cruelty and brutality that, these people in the chat are glorifying, right? They see an animal get tortured and they think, it's okay, it's acceptable. Maybe they even laugh about it. So they're evil people. Just because the majority opinion is pro-suffering doesn't make it a correct opinion or a good opinion or a moral opinion. If you only care about what the majority thinks, then you should be religious, right? You should watch Love Island, right? That's not the way the world works. Just because someone thinks something doesn't make it right. And just because Tess or Zoe in the chat are saying that, animals deserve to suffer, doesn't make it true either. Animals don't deserve to suffer. Nobody deserves to suffer. And protecting from suffering, with extinction, the only realistic way to do it, is more important than any shallow pleasures that these selfish people want. You know, safety is more important than pleasure. Suffering is more important than pleasure. Okay? Only a reckless, irresponsible, selfish, immoral, disgusting person like Tess and Zoe in the chat would say that, you know, we shouldn't care if children get tortured because we benefit from it. It's gross, it's wrong. They have morality upside down, basically, to where they somehow think that, you know, children being tortured and en masse is a good thing or some sort of moral thing. You know, here they are arguing in the comments, saying that I'm a bad person. So clearly they must think that, you know, children being tortured is okay somehow. So yeah, we have a crazy world full of crazy people like that. That is our biggest obstacle. How do we overcome that obstacle? It's going to be difficult. It's going to be a challenge. We're not saying it's going to be easy. We're going to need science, technology, logic, rationality, all of these great things. We're going to be using them to combat suffering and, you know, suffering enablers like these people. So join our challenge, join our mission, and stand up for the victims, defend them with us, and help us achieve a suffering-free world. Join the pro-extinction movement today. Join our Discord. It's on our website, proextinction.com, at the bottom of the page, and help us do what's right. Thanks for joining, everyone, and we'll see